So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I hope you are all keeping well. For those of you who I have not met before, my name is Eamon Chandel, and I am Head of Events and Conference Partnerships at Women in Mining UK. You may also know me from the Oxford Mining Club and the Natural Resources Forum. So welcome to you all. I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping points. If you could be so kind to keep your mics on mute, that would be greatly appreciated. If you prefer to keep your cameras off, please feel free to do so. But I hope you'll keep them on. You'll see why in a couple of minutes. We are recording today's event, which will be available in the next couple of days. So please do look out for the link. We don't have the traditional Q&A button as you would on an ordinary webinar. So please direct all your questions via the chat button, which is at the bottom of your screen. And we hope we'll be able to answer all of them. So to start us off, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Joe Birch, who has kindly stepped in very last minute for Christine Blackmore and Beth Payne, who both unfortunately were not able to make it today. They've been called away at very short notice. So a huge thank you to Joe for stepping in so quickly. Joe is a senior hydrogeologist and project manager at Golder, and also a partnership committee member at Women in Mining UK. And now I'd like to hand over to Joe.
Thank you, Eamon, and I hope I'll be able to do Christine and Beth justice in their absence this afternoon. Just to echo the welcome message there, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I hope Zoom or conference call platform of choice fatigue is not setting in too much with all of you, and looking forward to kicking off this July Women in Mining virtual event on the UK's mining renaissance. So we have a great panel lined up for you this afternoon. We have a couple of other things for you as well, which we'll move into shortly. But I guess just as an opening message, it's fair to say that the long history of the UK mining sector is well renowned, and while that might conjure up initial images of canaries and coal mines and poldark, the landscape is very much shifting, and looking forward to a buoying and informative discussion with our panel this afternoon. So we have some key players from the UK mining industry here with us this afternoon, and they'll be discussing the resurgence of mining activity on our doorstep, which is exciting. The panelists will discuss current exploration and development projects and how the UK compares to our European peers in terms of both hard and perceived risk. So without further ado, I'd like to first move us on to one of our three polls that we have for you this afternoon. So if I can ask the poll fairies in the background to bring up the first one for us. Hopefully that is all up for you on the screen now. So poll number one, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the new UK mining industry? And we've made it multiple choice for you, so please make your selections.
We're going to end it at 30 seconds. And here are your results. Social license to operate. Did you all get to see that?
I feel like we need a countdown clock, Eamon, for the shutdown. Okay, so we'll be revisiting the results of the poll later on in the session. Next up, we have something new for you. We are going to be trying a virtual networking breakout session. So please bear with us just while we set this up. The idea is to give everyone on the call here the opportunity to introduce themselves to a smaller group. Obviously, during current times, virtual networking is how we're doing things these days. So I'd like you all, once you're brought into a breakout room, to unmute yourselves, introduce yourselves, tell those of you in the group what you do, who you work with, and the question we'd like you all to answer is what.
Oh, I think we've lost Joe. Have we lost Joe? I think we have lost Joe. Okay, so while she tries and logs back on, I will take over. We're gonna put you into, oh, I think she's back. We're gonna put you into breakout rooms. Are you back, Joe?
I am back. Apologies.
Oh, great, wonderful. Well, I was just about to hit the make breakout room.
Perfect timing, perfect timing.
Perfect timing. So here we go, everybody. If you would put your cameras on, that would be greatly appreciated. Well, you should all be coming back now, slowly.
Hi. Gosh, the joys of live TV, as it were. God bless the Wi-Fi connection here. So
Joe,
apologies,
did it work?
Apologies for that.
Did it work though, Joe?
It did. We've had a lovely chat. Met some new faces.
That's wonderful.
Yes, I hope everyone enjoyed that session. So if we're all now back in the room, we have our second poll. So if I can ask for that one to be flashed up, please. With a drum roll.
You have 30 seconds.
Which metal is set for best future success in the UK mining sector? Again, multiple choice. And you'll see when we come to the panel discussion later on that perhaps there's one commodity there that has been notably missed.
Joe, I think we should take a poll to if someone can figure out which one it is.
Good idea. Yes, no prizes, just bragging rights at the end. But yeah, which do you think is missing there?
Right, I'm going to end the poll.
Right. Okay, so yes, results to follow a little later on. Okay, so without further ado, I think it's time to introduce our panelists for this afternoon. We have three great speakers for you. First up will be meeting Lucy Crane, who's a senior geologist and business development at Cornish Lithium. And Lucy is also the head of membership development for Women in Mining UK. Lucy will be discussing the Lithium for UK project consortium made up of Cornish Lithium, Wardle Armstrong International and the Natural History Museum, and funded by Innovate UK's Faraday Battery Challenge. The project is all about assessing the feasibility of a domestic lithium supply chain to support the UK's battery technology and EV industries. Lucy will also be giving us an update on Cornish Lithium, which is making strong progress exploring for lithium and other battery metals in Cornwall, and has recently completed 2 drill programs for lithium-enriched geothermal waters and lithium in hard rock. We'll then be welcoming Max Denning of Tungsten West, CEO for Tungsten West. He'll be giving us an update on one of the UK's flagship mining projects, Hemerdon, and how both the project and the company fit into the larger UK mining industry. And last but not least, we have Chris Cann, who is head of Aspmont Research and Intelligence, and he'll be discussing the UK's position in the mining journal World Risk Report 2019 and how it compares and contrasts to its European peers in terms of both hard and perceived risk. So without further ado, Lucy, if I can hand over to you, please.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Joe. Can you all hear me okay? I can see some nodding, yes, which is wonderful. And hopefully you can all see my screen as well. Is the presentation up there? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Thanks, Lucy.
Right, I'm aware that I've only got 10 minutes, so I will rattle on through my slides, but thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. Launching straight into it, the clean energy transition that we require to combat climate change is going to be hugely mineral intense. There's a really good report that came out in May, which is by the World Bank, and it's looking at the mineral intensity of the clean energy transition. And I think what it's really highlighting is we need raw materials. I know it's preaching to the choir here, but we need raw materials now more than we ever have done before, which means that we need to look in new places for them. We need to think about how we can extract them responsibly, and actually we need to make sure that we're extracting them in a way that has as little impact on the environment as it possibly can do. Something else that's also been thrust into the spotlight over the last few months is actually the COVID-19 pandemic. So many of our supply chains that are, you know, for critical raw materials, especially for this low carbon future, are heavily reliant on global supply chains, but heavily reliant on China. And that's particularly true in the battery metals space. And what we're seeing is that from the UK, from the EU, from North America, all of a sudden these regions are starting to think about, can we actually produce any of these critical raw materials ourselves if we've got the geology that would enable us to? You know, in the past, we've been very happy to just source things from overseas, but actually there's an increasing awareness from government that if we've got the geology to be able to produce some of these raw materials ourselves that are going to be so vital to our future economy, then maybe we should start to look at that. This is just a highlight. I know this map on the left is slightly out of date now, but it just shows that of lithium, global lithium production a couple of years ago, I suppose 3 years ago now, it's 2020, significant producers are the Lithium Triangle in South America, where they produce lithium from salar brines, and actually from hard rock in Australia. But what's really missing in that map is actually the lack of any significant lithium production in Europe, in Africa, primary production in Asia or North America. China actually has a lot of the processing capabilities to convert lithium into battery quality chemicals, and it's got, you know, a lot of the rest of that supply chain sewn up as well. So we're really trying to play catch up with China. It's also worth noting that actually, although the EU has no significant production of lithium at the moment, we're projected to be the second largest market for lithium outside of China in the next couple of years. So UK actually has lots of mineral potential. Cornish Lithium's obviously focused on Cornwall, but that's because of its strong mining heritage. You know, we are really well endowed with georesources. The county is actually underlain by some granites, and these granites are hot, they're enriched in lithium, and actually when they were intruded 290 million years ago, they also drove the deposition of tin and copper, and there's also the china clay that the region's now famous for. The region's largely been unexplored in light of modern exploration and extraction techniques, and we think that there's real opportunity that exists down here, and the opportunity lies in evaluating the historic data that's out there, but also we're looking for effectively new commodities now that weren't necessarily the focus of previous exploration techniques. In addition, extraction technologies are being developed as well. So Cornish Lithium's flagship idea is looking at producing lithium from the geothermal waters that circulate naturally at depth in the county. Even 5 years ago, this probably wouldn't have been feasible, but there have been such huge advances made in extraction technologies over the last few years to directly extract lithium from waters, such as those that we have in Cornwall, that actually it could well be feasible to do that on a commercial scale now. I should also mention that, you know, Cornish Lithium has actually got an advantageous mineral rights position. I'm sure Chris will talk about the mineral rights situation in the UK, and, you know, my previous job, I worked in, you know, we were doing exploration across various African countries, and it was a lot more straightforward than it was down here. However, Cornish Lithium's approach of going and signing up as many mineral agreements as possible, and that's still ongoing, means that we've actually got a really solid foundation to be exploring across the whole region. Why Cornwall? Well, actually, you know, it's famous for its tin, it's famous for its copper, it's famous for its china clay, but it's also produced all of these other metals that you can see listed on your screen at the moment. And, you know, as technology advances and as we need to build low carbon technologies to combat climate change, we can actually reassess Cornwall to explore for all of these other metals which have previously been considered byproducts. I've put this in to give you a kind of sense of scale. This is, oh, I forgot to put the source on, but it's from stats from the Cornwall and West Devon Mining World Heritage Site. And it shows that, you know, in today's money, over $50 billion worth of tin have been extracted from the county, over $12 billion worth of copper, and actually China clay is still a really significant industry in the area. Why is Cornwall so prospective? Well, it's because of the granite that underlies the county. This granite is enriched in lithium. The US Geological Survey have highlighted it as one of 5 bulk lithium enriched granites. So rather than a small pegmatite deposit, it's the bulk granite that's actually enriched in lithium. This granite forms all the topographic highs in the region. So if you know the southwest of England, it forms kind of Dartmoor, Bodmin, St Austell, and out to Land's End. And that's where the granite kind of outcrops at surface. But actually, it's all joined at depth in what we call a batholith. So it's a really significant volume of hot lithium-enriched granite. And these rocks are actually hotter than in the rest of the UK, which is why the region's also got such potential for deep geothermal energy. And if you look at this heat flow map that's on the left, you can see that I've put 2 X's over it. One represents the United Downs Deep Geothermal Power Project, where they've actually just drilled, well, last year drilled to over 5 kilometres to intercept hot waters, and they're going to be doing test work soon to see if they can actually produce power from that. And the other X is over the Eden Project, where they've got funding and they're currently in the process of procuring their drilling. So they're going to be drilling to see if they can heat the biomes and power the site through geothermal energy, which is pretty neat. We're actually focused on looking for lithium. The company started out being completely focused on looking for lithium contained within geothermal waters, but that's actually expanded now. I realise I'm rattling through this, but lithium kind of occurs in 2 geological settings in Cornwall. One is within these lithium-enriched geothermal waters. So the granite itself that underlies the county is hot and enriched in lithium, and over thousands, if not longer, thousands of years, waters have kind of permeated through these geological faults that cut across the county, and these cut through the granites as well. This has enriched these waters in lithium. So what we're aiming to do is effectively drill boreholes from the surface down through a number of these permeable geological structures where these waters circulate. And obviously, we're targeting these geological faults because they're permeable. If you think of a typical granite work surface, for example, that's not very permeable. So we need these geological structures to create space for these fluids to flow. So what we do is we want to drill from the surface down through a number of these geological structures, intercept the fluids that are naturally circulating within them, pump them up to the top. Ultimately, we want to extract the lithium and potentially utilize that geothermal heat, that geothermal energy that they contain. And we're looking at the opportunity for extracting lithium from what we're calling shallow boreholes, which are about 1 kilometre's depth, and potentially if we go deeper, we might be able to generate power as well. We're also looking at the potential for lithium contained within the hard rock itself. I'm very aware that I've only got a couple of minutes left. So Cornwall is actually a fantastic place to explore because it's got this amazing mining heritage, and we've got this whole wealth of historic data which we can use to model the subsurface, which really reduces the amount of money we need to spend on drilling to actually find things. We, just before lockdown, finished our first exploration drilling program for lithium in geothermal waters. We drilled down to 2 holes, diamond cored them down to about 1 kilometre's depth, and collected samples of waters from a number of these permeable horizons. I can't say what the results are, but we're really encouraged by them. They were warm and they've got lithium in them at levels that we think should be viable to process. So that's very exciting. We've also just finished a drill program looking at the potential for lithium in hard rock in the granite itself in the St Austell area. Again, we're still getting results coming in from that, but we're really quite excited by what we're finding. Just to wrap up and finish, the UK hasn't really been considered as a mining jurisdiction for the last few decades, but we really are seeing a kind of change in the government's attitude to it, both local government and also national government, and we're seeing there's an increasing imperative to see if we can actually find some of these critical raw materials ourselves. we, along with Wardell Armstrong and the Natural History Museum, have actually been awarded some money from the Faraday Battery Challenge, which is looking at, is it going to ever be viable to produce lithium in the UK and produce battery quality lithium chemicals that can then be used in the UK battery industry, which can then go into UK electric vehicles. We've got another few months left on that, but we think it's the first time that the government have actually thought about the upstream sourcing of critical raw materials, and we're building really strong relationships along the whole supply chain as well. So it really feels like the tide's kind of turning at the moment. We're at a really interesting point of time, and it's a really great window of opportunity, but we do need to be acting on it now. So thanks very much. I better stop.
Great, thanks, Lucy. It really sounds like, as you said, there's a real positive energy and developments there with the project. So next up, if I can hand over straight to Max, please.
Give me 5 seconds. Can you see it?
I think it's just loading now, Max.
Well, let me kick off because it's literally just a bunch of pictures. My name is Max Denning, CEO of Tungsten West. We bought the Hemerdon project back in November 2019. Hemerdon was previously owned by Wolf Minerals. They invested over £200 million in the project. They built the processing plant and the mine waste facility and started mining back in October 2015. However, fell into major difficulties with the processing plant. After 3 years of production, the company went into administration in October 2018. And we spent about 6 months doing technical and legal DD on the asset to see if there is an economic way of processing the tungsten. The reason why Wolf Minerals went into receivership is predominantly due to 2 reasons. A lack of appreciation of the mineralogy and the metallurgy of the deposit. Paradoxically, the ore body sort of averages a grade of about 0.2% tungsten. So it looks like quite a simple asset to process. You can see on the picture the granite lode with Killer's host rock in between, so the contact's very visible as well. So it should be an easy mining. Processing should have been quite simple. However, there was a lack of appreciation of the friability of the tungsten mineral, which is wolframite and ferberite. Tungsten minerals, especially on the iron end members, are incredibly friable minerals. You've got to treat them with great care. Otherwise, when you crush them down, you end up over crushing them or over comminuting them, and you end up incurring high slimes, which is what Wolf Minerals were incurring. Beyond that, the processing plant also suffered from stability and lack of surge capacity. They didn't have enough redundancy in the processing plant, where if they had one piece of equipment fail, the whole plant would turn off. So those 2 issues, both recovery and stability, their recovery is about half of what they thought they were going to be, and their plant availability was again half. So they built a processing plant, and they're only generating revenues of a quarter of what they were expecting to, a quarter to a third. And therefore, that's the reason why it went into receivership. It wasn't economic. Since we've done technical and legal DD on the asset, our main focus has really been taking a fresh pair of eyes, a fresh look at what is the actual ore here. We've done a lot of metallurgical test work on the ore body, checking out the mineralogy to understand exactly what is the most profitable way and economic way of processing the ore. The ore body is very coarse grained ferberite wolframite minerals. It's very, very nuggety, but of course, as I said before, very friable. This means that actually the ore is very, very susceptible to something called X-ray transmission ore sorting. X-ray transmission ore sorting is very similar to what you do at the airport. You chuck your luggage on a conveyor. The luggage gets scanned by X-rays and assesses density. Very similar situation here. In fact, it uses the same technology at Heathrow Airport. Let me go across to one of the pictures there. The pebbles and cobbles are scanned by X-rays. Each individual one is assessed or analysed for density. If it is not dense, it falls into the first bucket at the end of the conveyor. If it is dense, air pockets push up the cobbles and pebbles into a second bucket where they get processed, or further processed. What does this mean? What it means is the test that we've done to date suggests that we've got about an 87% recovery of the tungsten with a 30% mass pull. If you can imagine that under Wolf Minerals, they had a processing plant that was going to process about 3 to 3.5 million tonne per annum. We are only going to be downstream processing a third of that because we're rejecting 2/3 of the ore, which is barren. It means that when we feed the material to the concentrator plant, you're going to have a much better response. Why? You're feeding the concentrator a much coarser grain mineral. You're feeding it at a higher grade, so we expect the grades into the concentrator plant to be 2 to 3 times that of the run of mine. And finally, there are a few nasties in the ore body, whether it's zircons and monazites and a few hematite intrusions, etc., etc. Through the ore sorting process, a lot of those nasties get rejected. So what it means is we're delivering into the concentrator plant a much higher quality feed, which we know is going to perform a lot better in the existing concentrator plant. We've done all the test work. We are now in a process of writing up the DFS. We expect the DFS to be published, if Mel gets on with it, we expect the DFS to get published by Q1 2021. We believe it'll take us about 6 months to rebuild the processing plant. Given I've just told you about the sort of processing plant that we're making, it is predominantly to do with the front end. So all we're going to do is change out the crushing circuit, the screening circuit, and a couple of other pieces of equipment. And we're going to install a new crushing circuit with X-ray transmission ore sorting on the front end, which will generate a very, very economic project. There will be further upgrades that we'll make to the processing plant as we progress the project. But given the fact that we've already had 200 million quid of capital spent on the project, we know the beast that we're dealing with very well now. A lot of lessons have been learned. We believe that we can progress this thing pretty quickly.
Great, thanks Max, and nothing like a public prod there for wrapping up the DFS.
Have I got a public prod?
In the background there. Great, thank you. We're starting to see a couple of questions coming in, but we'll save those for the Q&A. Please do keep them coming through. I'd now like to bring Chris Can into the discussion, please. Chris, if you'd like to take over.
Sure, does that work? Can you see my screen?
Yes, thanks, Chris.
All right, cool. So thanks a lot for inviting us to share this with you guys. So as was mentioned, we run something called the Investment Risk Index as part of our World Risk Report. And basically what that does is it looks across about just over 100 jurisdictions and assesses the risk to a mining investment. So I'm glad there's a question mark at the end of the UK mining renaissance, because for us there's very much good news in there and a lot of potential. And from Max and Lucy's presentations, obviously there's a lot of optimism out there. But from what we're seeing in a global context, at least, and even in a UK EU context, I think there's probably a fair bit of work to do. So just quickly showing how we get our numbers. So you'd be aware there are quite a few different rating systems out there at the moment. Most of these are very much survey based. So we felt that there's a little bit too much volatility in a survey, largely because of the fact that they've got shifting demographics year on year, and they're open to manipulation, etc., etc. They're valuable, but they have a few soft points. So what we've done is we've pulled together a group of what we would consider hard risk metrics, and they run across 5 different categories: legal, governance, social, fiscal, and infrastructure. And they're things like the World Bank's Ease of Business Index and Fund for Peace, Fragile States Index, etc. So these are essentially more stable metrics that we can rely on, and they kind of lessen the volatility in our index, we feel. So we look at those with a weighted approach. So legal has 40% of the weighting, governance 20%, social 15%, fiscal is at 12.5%, and infrastructure is at 7.5%. And then the hard risk metrics are at 80%, and the survey or perceived risk is at 20%. So it's not necessarily completely straightforward, unfortunately, but the thing you need to take from it is that we take a fairly measured approach to this, and it's not just based in a survey. So jumping into where the UK sits over there on the right in the bright red, and instantly, hopefully from this you can see it's pretty good from a European context. So it's not the best, but it's doing okay. So the UK, I think it's a 64 out of 100, which is good, which is okay. The EU average is 62, and the global average is 60, so it's doing okay. The big pillars you can see there are Sweden and Finland, which I think would surprise very few people as being the standouts for low risk mining jurisdictions in a European context. And then obviously Ireland in the green there is up there as well, and Ireland's done some fantastic work over a long period of time on ensuring that its mining code and specifically its fiscal incentives for business in general, but for mining as well specifically, are really good. A couple of outliers in there are Austria and Germany, and I just said that we've got a caveat in there. Basically, this isn't prospectivity necessarily. This isn't what kind of rocks are there. It's the risk to your investment once you're there. So so that might explain those couple of outliers. I won't dwell on the ones that haven't done so well. So this is the UK versus the rest of the world, and looking at it on a year-on-year basis. So as you can see, rest of the world there, although that should be actually the world on the right, and it's creeping upwards slightly. And what we've seen is that there is a general trend for the jurisdictions that we cover to improve, one, their mining codes, and 2, their governance. And the governance is a big one that's improving from what we're seeing. Ireland's looking pretty steady. Europe creeping upwards, which is a great thing. And the disappointing set of columns that you'll see on the left there are the United Kingdom, which not only is dropping away, but compared to the others in the movements there, it's dropping away fairly significantly. So yeah, so overall pretty good, but the trend isn't what we'd probably all like to see. So once again here, this is year on year, but also looking at the breakdown of the different categories there. So those 2 batches on the left there, legal and governance, they're the ones where we've got really heavy weighting. So to remind you, legal's at 40%, governance is at 20%, and that was based on industry consultation that we did over a 3 or 4 month period across various sizes of companies and stakeholders. So the real problem there is legal. So Minehut, which does our hard risk ratings, which has its regulatory risk index. For those of you not familiar, they're the only legal consultancy that does a mining code analysis around the world. They say anything lower than a 50 is a problem. So UK is skirting the boundaries of being okay there. Governance very, very, very strong. So that looks great from our perspective, although it's also dropping away. And social is the other area that's heavily weighted, and there's a big problem. So one of the things that we factor in is population density, and that's from the very basic premise that people don't really like mining. Obviously, everyone on this call likes mining. We love mining, but I think most of us probably don't want to mine at the end of our driveway. So places that are densely populated don't tend to do well as mining jurisdictions, and you can then, in a European context, compare probably weather-related. You can compare Scandinavia to the UK, and the fact that Scandinavia has, for a relatively large area to its population, that's probably why it doesn't have as many problems or too many problems bringing out board. Fiscal okay, infrastructure really good. And I think what you'd probably say, going back to that legal column and where there's a lot of optimism, the Minehut guys are really hot on discretion. So a lot of the wording on mining codes that don't do so well around the world, it comes down to discretion, and largely ministerial discretion. So regardless of what your permit says and what you've done, when it gets to that point where you're saying, look, I've got this far, I've got my resource, I've got my economic studies, I want to move it forward to that next level. The minister, if he or she's had a bad day or gets up on the wrong side of bed, can say, actually, no, I don't like it. Or more likely, they have a particularly strong political catalyst at that point that means that they would like to say no to this for their own political purposes. And what the Minehut guys like to see is they like to see very, very clear, well outlined pathways on what you need to do to move your asset to the next level. And so that's not a huge investment for the UK to do that. So if the UK wants to improve its framework in the eyes of foreign investors, at least, that's an area where there's a lot of potential. So this is the governance category that isn't looking so hot for the UK. As you can see, their transparency, although declining a little bit over 3 years, is looking still really good. I mean, it's close to 90. It's fantastic, and to be honest, it's what you'd probably expect. Ease of business is obviously the problem there, and that's dropped away fairly significantly, and that's a World Bank measure largely, as well as our perceived ratings as well. But we wouldn't be surprised if there's a fair bit of Brexit wrangling involved in that rating. And then finally, as we suggested, there's a hard versus perceived contrast here. So we would always, in our metrics, we always see perception being higher than the hard risk metrics suggests. So there's always a little bit of a perceived premium, if you will. And probably what you'd expect is about what you see on the 2017 and 2018 ratings, where there's a pretty healthy premium there on what people think that the risk environment's like and what it actually is by our metrics. 2019, and that comes right back. So that unfortunately flies in the face of what we're hearing earlier, that people are very bullish about the UK as a mining industry. And I'm not 100% sure why that would be. Part of me thinks that perhaps it comes down to issues like Max was talking about when Wolf had Himmerden previously. It's a technical risk. It's got nothing to do with the framework, but failed projects don't particularly make great headlines. Similarly to what's happened up at Woodsmith potentially, nothing to do with the framework there, but you need success stories, and hopefully what Lucy and Max are doing lead to a few more of those success stories. The only thing I would like to finish by saying is, at the moment, in terms of that, the perception versus the hard risk ratings, and you can see that there's a very steady, although slightly declining, hard risk rating as well. There feels like there's a huge opportunity to make some big improvements and really improve that that hard risk framework there by changing some of the legislation and making it a bit more visibly attractive through improved mining codes, etc., and mining specific regulation to make up some ground for the UK, particularly now on its way out of the EU and from a strategic minerals perspective. So yeah, that upside is definitely there, and overall the UK is looking pretty steady. So yeah, that's all I've got until questions.
That's great. Thanks very much, Chris. So yes, positive messages heard so far, but still opportunities for more to be done there. We've had one question come through on the chat. Please do keep pondering if there's anything else that you'd like to pose to our panelists this afternoon. I'd just like to pick up on a couple of the points that we've heard about this afternoon. So I think both Chris and Lucy in particular mentioned about the NIMBYism, or perhaps the public perception and social license to operate piece. So perhaps Lucy, if I can come to you and ask perhaps for your thoughts on what we need to be doing to change the conversation or change the perception of the mining industry locally.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks also, Max and Chris. Those were really interesting talks. I think in the UK, I think what was really interesting about the public perception that Chris was just talking about, I think there's going to be really strong regional differences in what the public perception of mining actually is. So I imagine if you ask a load of people in London, it's the whole "we don't need it, doesn't happen here," kind of NIMBY, not in my backyard, I don't want it at the end of my road. But so I'm based down in Cornwall, and the mining heritage down here is still such a strong part of people's identity. You go for a walk and you see an engine house, people still in living memory remember family members or colleagues like working underground. And since the mining industry shut or stopped, really, apart from China Clay, Cornwall's just become so reliant on tourism and agriculture, and I think there's a real desire to see some kind of primary industry coming back. And obviously I can't speak for everybody, but what we're finding in all of the community engagement we're doing so far is actually there's a pretty positive view of the mining industry down here. I think Rowan might be on the call, but there's some research that the Campbell School of Mines are part of, which is looking at EU mining districts, and particularly looking at where companies are trying to restart the industry in old mining districts, and what's the public sentiment like that? Is there any social support for it? And apparently Cornwall is the only place, or the southwest of England is the only place, where local people have actually written in to support applications rather than being against them. And obviously that's going to be different in different parts of the country. But yeah, I don't know. I think also it boils down to this huge disconnect that we have in most parts of society between what we're actually using in our day-to-day lives and where it comes from. People are very quick to denounce the mining industry, but then pull out their iPhone and drive off in their car. So I don't know, maybe part of what we need to do to combat this "not in my backyard" attitude is to say, look, if we want to combat climate change, if we want to have a civilized society, we need to try and help people make that link between if something hasn't been grown, it's been mined. And so maybe we need to think about how we can extract that responsibly, and maybe there's an opportunity that we're going to extract that more responsibly or have more oversight of it if it is in our backyard.
Yeah, that's great. No, thank you, Lucy. Max, perhaps can you comment have you been seeing similar responses down at Tungsten West? What's your experience been?
Yes, so I mean, on a real world perspective, obviously we have many different parish councils around here. We intersect 2 or 3, and we make it, one of our primary factors is going to every single parish council meeting that we're requested to go to, informing the local community as to what our plans look like, what progress has been made, and just managing their expectations. The UK is obviously quite a densely populated country. This mine specifically, is about 5 kilometres from Plymouth. I mean, you could have seen Plymouth in the picture from my presentation. So you're always going to deal with, you know, the potential issue of being near local communities. But, you know, let's face it, Wolf Minerals was hiring 300 people down here. It was a huge job creator. Those jobs have now been lost. It's impacted the local economy. We get on our website many people you know, dropping us an email asking us to see if there are any jobs going, former Wolf employees, etc., etc., etc. So, you know, from the economic perspective, it hasn't been great for the community down here. So, you know, the overarching response has been very much, you know, we want to see the mine back up and running. Of course, in the community, you're always going to get a couple of, you know, busybodies or whatever who are always going to have issue with it, but they are far outweighed by the positive sentiment we receive there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Good to hear. That's really encouraging. Moving on from that slightly, Chris, if I can perhaps just ask you to comment on where you see perhaps the easy wins, if you like, of moving things forward, based on the risk results that you mentioned. Where do you see the industry focusing locally?
I mean, I think it comes back to the code feels like the easy win. I think a lot of people who are looking to come into a country to invest in the mining industry, one of the first things they'll look at is the mining code and what kind of protections they have. That's not a huge investment compared to you know, building infrastructure, etc. So that feels like an easy win. But I'd just like to touch on some of the points that Lucy and Max both made there, and I think a lot of it is about applying the kind of processes that Max is talking about in terms of engaging with communities, which I don't think the industry has traditionally done very well, and then getting some wins on the board. You look at places like Mongolia, for example, everyone's just looking at Oyu Tolgoi, and if that goes ahead and they manage to get that right, then they'll probably see a big influx of investment or a bigger influx of investment. Get that wrong, as they seem to be doing, and people are wary and they stand clear. I think people watching what's happening down at Hemerden, people watching what's happening in the southwest in general, people looking at things like Scott Gold up in Scotland, small operation, but managed to get something permitted in a national park in Scotland. So things are happening, and I think you get a few wins on the board. I think that builds publicity, and you get the government actually making an effort to change the infrastructure, the legal infrastructure and frameworks around the mining industry. I think that would make a big difference.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, definitely good to keep momentum moving there. I'm just going to turn my attention quickly to the chat. I'm conscious that we have 5 minutes left of our slot. Max, we had a couple of technical questions come in. One of which was, is the 2/3 of the ore mid-fines rejects planned to be sent to ore stockpiles or directly to waste? Any hope in research indicating advances in processing the fines in the future?
So 2/3 of the ore, yeah, will be rejected and sent directly to waste. We are looking at the viability of selling them as aggregates. We are 1.5 kilometres away from the nearest rail siding. We're 5 kilometres away from Plymouth Port. We've got pretty decent logistical solutions to export or reuse a lot of the waste that we're generating from the mine. So, you know, we have actually potentially got a third revenue stream beyond just tin and tungsten, and that's aggregates. And I think it probably plays quite well into sort of the sustainability push that, you know, if you're concentrating tungsten and tin, and obviously the waste streams from doing that can then be sold as something else, then I think, you know, that's going to go down well with, you know, the green credentials of the business.
Mm. Yeah, good opportunity there. The second question that came in for you was, did Wolf ever sort out the low frequency vibration problems in the process plant before going into receivership?
No,
or is
yeah,
this
so
an issue?
no, they didn't. And that's the reason why I said when it comes to rebuilding the processing plant, we are changing out those problem screens that have been cited as generating a lot of low frequency noise. You know, I've worked on many mining projects in the world. I've never seen screens so big in my entire life. These things were then put on stilts and sat 30 meters up in the processing plant, and was essentially acting like a boom box on top of Dartmoor. Those have all been taken out. The product screen, which was the main issue, which is where you separate your fines from your coarse, that's going to be half the size of the previous screen because of ore sorting, and it's going to be on a concrete plinth down on the ground where we won't generate any low frequency noise.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're, I think we need to now move to our final poll of the session. If I can ask for that to be brought up, please.
Right, here we go. Poll number 3.
And then we'll be rattling through the results. So based on what you've heard today, has your perception of the potential of the new UK mining industry changed?
You've got 30 seconds.
And this will obviously be a measure of how our panelists have done this afternoon.
No one's declining.
Does it count that we clicked improved as well?
Yes, it does.
If everyone goes away happy, that's a win.
The same, Max.
The poll has ended. Should I share some results, Joe?
Yes, please do.
So let's go back to poll number 1. And here, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the new UK mining industry? Can you all see those?
We can.
Social license to operate.
Right.
Right, so
There's certainly a lot of action on the chat around that topic. So that's, yeah, that's telling.
which metal is set for the best future success in the UK mining sector? And in a minute, we're going to ask you which one we left off. So here we go, share results. Lithium took home the gold. So which one did we leave off?
Tungsten.
Yes.
Sorry,
Tungsten
Max.
and gold. We've got Scott Gold on the call as well. And also fertilizer.
Are available.
And last but not least, number 3, based on what you've heard today, has your perception of the potential of the new UK mining industry changed? I'm glad to hear that. It's improved.
That's positive, yes.
That's reassuring.
Yes, we can all keep doing what we're doing. Very good. Okay, well, thank you for those results there, Imon. I think that brings us nicely to a close. I'd just like to say again a big thank you to our panelists this afternoon for joining us and for speaking, and to everyone that's attended, and equally to our Women in Mining events committee for bringing this together. I guess just as a little plug for those of you that are perhaps new to these events, Women in Mining UK is a volunteer-run non-profit which promotes the employment, retention and progress of women in the mining industry. Everyone is welcome to become a member of WIM, regardless of gender or where you're located in the world. So please do go to our website to join and to sign up. Membership is free, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you in person or virtually at future events.
Thank you, Joe, for being brilliant at moderating at the very last minute. And thank you to Max and Chris and Lucy for joining us. That's us logging off.